Let's be honest, there are a lot of emotional appeals made in the world. The most common that we see around here comes from the religious, but they are certainly not alone. Lots of people believe things because it strokes their own egos or gives you that all-powerful dopamine hit in the skull, and the second that that's the case, at least in my opinion, you've got some problems. Today, though, we're going to evaluate it from an entirely non-religious point of view, and I figure that's going to make a lot of people very, very mad. So stay tuned for that. So today we're going to do something completely different, and I'm going to take a look at a video by Alex O'Connor, the Cosmic Skeptic. Now, don't take this as me being mad at Alex or saying that Alex is wrong. He's just put out a video that shows quite clearly a lot of the problems that I have with the religious in a patently non-religious context. Nobody is immune unless they're very, very careful. This is where I think people run into problems, and even if you might not agree, please try to give it a fair chance before you get upset in the comments. Emotional outbursts don't really get you anywhere. So let's go and take a look.
Imagine you're on a walk, alone, in the middle of the day, and you pass by a small body of water. You begin to hear thrashing and screaming, and you realize that the sound is coming from a drowning child just a few meters from where you're stood. Luckily, the water is pretty shallow, and it'll be really easy for you to wade in and save the child. But you'll ruin your shoes and your trousers. You'll get them all muddy and you'll have to replace them.
Now, please don't take this the wrong way, but I'm sorry, I'm just not going to bite. This is the problem that I see with a lot of so-called moral dilemmas, even the classical ones. They are designed specifically to appeal to people of a, shall we say, particular emotional state, where the choice is so utterly unbalanced that it seems absurd to choose one thing over the life of the child. It is intended to shame the individual who might be considering the other option, and that is very much a problem. In this case, the difference between an easily saved human child and your shoes is really pretty absurd. You can wash your shoes, you can get new shoes. The family of the child might very well give you even better shoes in thanks for saving their offspring. It is a purposely, ridiculously out of balance scenario designed specifically to get the answer that the questioner wants. And I would think that Alex would recognize that. And I think that he does because I think, and I'm not doing this to be mean or to suggest poor things about Alex, but I think he knows he's doing it.
Your shoes cost maybe $100. So you decide not to wade in and not to save the child.
But let's look at a slightly different scenario. What if you see the child way off in the distance and you're the only one around that can save it? Well, what if you can't swim? What if you stand a better than average chance of drowning on the way out? What if your family is depending on you for everything? Without you, they have no food, no shelter, they're going to die, or at the very least, suffer greatly if you are taken away from them. Then, the moral choice is to simply walk away. It is not just one life measured against another. It's a multitude of lives potentially measured against one. And this is where so many of these philosophical problems have issues. The trolley problem is just a mess, for example, especially when you start playing mix and match with who's on the tracks, because it ignores the reality of humanity. If my child is on the tracks, I don't care how many people you stack like cordwood on the other side. I'm going to let all of them die without a moment's thought. If that's my child in the water, you'd better believe that I'm going to be out there, even if I can't swim. But if it's a stranger, if it's someone outside of my direct social circle, yeah, there are going to be questions, and there should be. That's the thing that most people don't want to consider. There should be considerations there. But we'll get back to that in a minute.
You let them die because you want to save your money. But hold on, isn't that just the most evil thing you've ever heard?
Sure, because you came up with it for that purpose specifically. And I'm not attacking Alex. I'm going to say that a lot because I'm not attacking Alex. I'm using him as an example because I know where this is coming from. I'm just saying that this is a very uneven analogy presented specifically to get a very specific emotional reaction. It's one of the reasons I'm not a fan of humanism in general. My moral sense is not based on an inordinate love for Homo sapiens sapiens. There is a value judgment that has to go into it, whether people like Alex like that or not.
A person refusing to save this child's life because they want to save $100 to spend on their shoes? This would be morally outrageous. We'd consider it an ethical crime to refuse to save a child from drowning to save a little bit of money. Of course, $100 is a lot of money for a lot of people, but for someone willing to spend it on trendy shoes, it can't be life or death.
But what happens if, instead of shoes, it was your paycheck in your pocket, and if you go out to save the child, you lose the only $100 that you have to feed your family for the next 2 weeks? Now, I'm sure that people will argue that there has to be an alternative, but let's say, for the sake of argument, that there isn't. If that check or money or whatever is ruined, that's it. No food for weeks. My infant daughter, if I had an infant daughter, will starve to death before I have money again. Now what's the moral choice? Because the whole reason this is set up the way that it is because Alex, in this case, is looking for a very specific reaction. It's because it's guiding the choice that Alex wants you to make. I'm not calling him dishonest because I doubt that he even recognizes what he's doing, because a lot of people that I talk to about this kind of thing, they very clearly don't. But a lot of people do exactly this. If I saw a person or a dog or a cat or anything else drowning in a pool of water and I could help them without inordinate danger to myself or to those I love, well, you'd better believe I'd be out there in a second. This is not what this example is designed to do, though. This is designed to make you say, well, I love people, therefore I'm going to risk whatever.
Yet, isn't this exactly what we do every time we refuse to give money to charity because we want to spend it on shoes or a new phone or a fancy dinner?
Nope, because here's something that science knows. We are really only attached to a relatively small number of people in our lives. Friends, family, people that we know well. It's usually 2,000 people or less, and it's usually much, much less than that. Beyond that, you don't really have a strong emotional attachment to individuals. You might have an attachment to the idea of people, but not to the people themselves. And this is a problem that I see humanists often having. They are attached to the idea of people, not the people themselves. An estimated 65 million people die every single year. Exactly how broken up are you by any of them? I mean, the ones that you don't know, the ones that you've never heard of, the people that you would never have encountered anywhere in your lives. How much do you actually care about any of them? Approximately 120 people die every single minute. Do you care? I mean, do you really, really care? Are you emotionally traumatized by that reality? Are you constantly breaking down twice a second because someone, somewhere, for some reason, keeled over? I hope not, because you got some serious emotional problems if you do. But that's the problem. People don't care. People, I would argue, shouldn't care, as bad as that might sound. Because people, the actual individuals themselves, just aren't that important.
Consider a similar scenario. A child is dying not from drowning in front of you, but from malaria, starvation, or diarrhea on the other side of the globe.
Okay, what am I supposed to do about it? Keep in mind that anything that I give to charity right this second will be far too late to help that specific child. This is concern over the idea of humans and not over individual humans. This is a problem that I see all the time, and I'm sure you see the same thing. When someone famous dies, you get all kinds of people bawling their eyes out because, oh no, this individual is gone. Okay, so what? People die. Deal with it. Everybody is going to die. You have to get that through your head. It's one thing, I suppose, if they die of a tragic accident in the prime of their lives, but it's something else entirely if they're 96 years old, sucking food through a straw and shitting in a bag. People die. It's the one constant that we all have to face. Tough shit. Usually, these are people who haven't done anything noteworthy in decades. Oh, they sang that song once. Okay, great. That song is still there. Go listen to it. Watch the movie that ancient actor was once in. It's not like the second these people drop dead, everything that they ever did winks out of existence. It goes on whether the artist is around anymore or not. Go watch a movie that was made in the 50s or 60s. Just think about everybody in that movie. Because guess what? Just about everyone in that movie is dead. Are you broken up about it? You shouldn't be, because that's just life.
If you receive an appeal from a charity saying you can save this child's life if you'll only donate some money, and you refuse so that you can spend it on other things that you don't really need, isn't this just the same as walking past the drowning child and pretending not to see them?
Nope, not remotely. I mean, from a practical standpoint, there are tons of charities out there begging for money and spending the vast majority of their donations on administrative costs and payroll. The amount of money that goes to anyone in need is very, very small. Those TV commercials, they aren't free. It doesn't really matter. 65 million people are going to die this year, probably more because the population keeps going up. Do we actually need the vast majority of these people to stick around? And I would argue no. This planet is already choked with an infestation of humans, and we could actually do with a few less. Quite a few less. Do their friends and family and close circle of acquaintances miss them? Absolutely, and that's a shame. It doesn't mean that anyone really ought to care about the nameless and faceless millions. I mean, my father is dead. I miss him because I knew him. That doesn't mean that I expect anyone out there who never knew him to miss him too. My mother, right this minute, has inoperable cancer. She's going to die sooner rather than later. And guess what? That's life. I don't want her to, but the reality is she's going to. Reality doesn't care about my feelings, and it doesn't care about yours. Reality is ultimately all that matters. Why are there children starving? Because there were people who bred faster than they could provide food for them. Is that fair? No, but who said life was fair? Why do people die of disease? Because that's what biological life forms do. We're not special to anyone but us. People are attached to the idea of humanity, and that's one reason I'm not a fan of humanism. Humanism, at least in my experience with a lot of humanists, has very little nuance. It's just demanding that we protect everyone without asking if we should, or even if we can. It's an emotional response, not an intellectual one. There are hard decisions that have to be made. And guess what? Not everyone needs to be saved.
This is the challenge raised by Peter Singer in his famous essay, Famine, Affluence and Morality, and later in his book, The Life You Can Save. I'd recommend both if you're interested in challenging yourself. After reading the second of these for the first time, I remember going on a walk and seriously considering selling most of my non-essential possessions and giving the money to charity.
And it wouldn't have done a damn thing. Virtually none of those people would have been saved. This is the unfortunate reality that a lot of people just don't want to face. It's why, if you notice, a lot of charities are taking to sending along pictures of children for you to hang on your refrigerator. It keeps the money flowing when you feel a direct personal attachment to a single individual. Ultimately, and I hate to say this, but ultimately, it's a con job, playing on your emotions and not on your intellect. I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to like what I'm saying because, as we all know, a lot of people can't separate their emotional reactions from their rational mind. It's why we still have religion. Think about it.
Singer's argument is an amazingly simple one. If it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening, without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought, morally, to do it.
Bullshit. Now, granted, as I've already said, if I could dive into the water and save an innocent if I was at little or no risk to myself or the ones that I cared about, you'd better believe that I'd do it, because I actually do care in general terms about humanity. That doesn't mean that we can save them all, nor that we should even try. The overwhelming majority of people currently alive on the planet will live whatever lives that they have and then die, and virtually no one will ever know that they were ever here. That's how human history works. We are totally unaware of virtually every single person that has ever existed on this planet, yet the world continues on. This is what happens when you go straight for emotion without ever stopping to think, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't actually make any sense. It's why religion operates the way that it does, and Alex ought to know that, yet when it comes to his own personal emotional attachments, he's pushing all of that aside, at least based on this video. And like I said, this isn't an attack on Alex, because lots and lots and lots of people do the exact same thing. My goal, one that I'm sure a lot of people won't like, is to get people to stop and think and say, hey, wait a minute, and realize that the emotional response doesn't actually get them anywhere useful. That's not to say that emotions aren't useful or shouldn't be used in the appropriate situations, but that is not every second of every day. If we stop trying to save everyone and just use the limited resources that we have to do the best that we can to improve the lives of the most that we can, ultimately things would start to improve. Because realistically, if you think about what's going on, all we're doing is we're throwing money at a bunch of people who are in situations that never really get better. So, great, we save one child, and they grow up and they have 10 children of their own, and then we've got 10 more children to save because the underlying conditions have never improved. That's what we need to worry about, the underlying conditions and the overall survivability of the human species. Eventually, like it or not, we're going to run out of space. It's about time we started considering that reality carefully.
Now, this principle seems obvious when applied to the drowning child. We can prevent something bad, the child drowning, by sacrificing nothing of comparable moral importance. Our shoes and our trousers are nowhere near as valuable as a child's life.
And who are you to make that decision? Now, I would agree in principle, but we're looking at reality here. Where do you get off thinking that you get to tell people how they ought to think? Why is it that what you want goes and not what anyone else does? Mob rule doesn't really get you anywhere. I'm sure that's going to spur a huge emotional backlash in a lot of people because some of this has been very ingrained into us by evolution and by society. Childhood indoctrination is insidious even when religion isn't involved. These are questions that need to be asked, but a lot of people of a particular emotional ideological persuasion just don't want to consider it. And that's kind of sad when you think about it.
So we ought to do it. But this principle doesn't specify who the bad thing is happening to or where they are in the world. It just says that if we can prevent it, we should. And so if someone is dying of malaria on the other side of the world, and we can take the money we were going to spend buying a new necklace or eating at a restaurant, and instead donate it to the Against Malaria Foundation, saving that person's life, we should always do it, right?
Why? Because again, if they are dying of malaria right this minute, any money that you provide isn't going to do that individual any good. They'll be long dead before they ever get the help that they need. So do we focus on one person? Or do we look at what's going on in that part of the world and try to address the lack of clean water and food and proper sanitation that gives rise to those mosquitoes? Are we going to bring everybody up, or are we going to just keep letting people suck up resources and never get demonstrably better? And I know people are going to hate this. I know. But we have to be realistic about this. We have to say, hey, what are the problems that are hurting the people, not individuals, but the people? And how do we fix that? It all reminds me of a bit by comedian Sam Kinison, who died in a traffic accident in 1992, but he had it all right.
Hey, I'm just trying to help. Well, like I said, I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to just do whatever I can for people. Like the World Hunger thing, the USA for Africa. Isn't that great? You guys hear the song? Nice song, isn't it? Beautiful. I'm like anybody else on the planet. I'm very moved by world hunger. I see the same commercials. Those little kids starving and very depressed. And I watch these things on TV and I see those commercials and I look at it and I go, God, how cruel, you know? Just see a little kid out there and I go, fuck, you know, I know the film crew could give this kid a sandwich. You know the kid's not out there, filming a letter from home with a Betamax, huh? You know there's a director 5 feet away going, don't feed him yet! Get that sandwich out of here! It doesn't work unless he looks hungry! But I'm not trying to make fun of world hunger. Matter of fact, I think I have the answer, because I spent a lot of time working it out. And if you want to stop world hunger, stop sending them food. Don't send these people another bite, folks. You want to send them something, you want to help, send them U-Hauls. Send them U-Hauls, some luggage, and send them a guy out there that goes, hey, you know, we've been driving out here every day with your food for like the last, 30, 40 years. And we were driving out here today across the desert, and it occurred to us there wouldn't be world hunger if you people would live where the food is! You live in a desert! Understand that you live in a fucking desert! Nothing grows out here! Nothing's gonna grow out here! You see this? Huh? See this? This is sand. Yeah. It's sand. You know it's going to be 100 years from now, huh? It's going to be sand! You live in a fucking desert! Get your kids, get your shit. We'll make one trip. We'll take you to where the food is. We have deserts in America. We just don't live in them, asshole!
For some reason, these situations feel different. Whilst most of us would all agree that you're obligated to save the drowning child, most people think that giving to charity is, though a good thing to do, not something that you morally have to do in the same way. It's a virtue, but not an obligation.
And neither is an obligation. Now, sure, I'd say if you can help and it causes you no harm, then you probably ought to, but you get to choose what you do with your own money. Nobody else does, and nobody can guilt you into it. If you want to give your spare change to help cheetahs in Kenya, go right ahead. Because people are not the only species out there that needs help. Or if you don't want to, don't. You shouldn't feel obligated because people are trying to guilt you into giving them your money. That's how religion works, if you notice. And all of this is essentially the same thing. Give money to your church so they can help people. Except they're only helping people as a consequence of trying to save their soul. They don't actually care about the people. They care about their membership rolls. Giving money to charity, it isn't really helping the world as a whole. It's just giving you that feel-good dopamine hit in the head. And that's what keeps people doing it. It's an addiction to brain chemistry. You don't have any kind of obligation to do anything that you don't want to. People need to stop with the childish guilt trips. The pictures of little starving kids in Africa and the dogs and cats digging through the trash. Just because it tugs at your heartstrings, that doesn't mean you have to feel obligated to contribute your money. I mean, I do. I give money to charity because I do have the capacity and I do have the desire to do so. But that doesn't mean I have any obligation, and it also doesn't mean that I don't understand what's really going on. There is a lot of shit going on here that a lot of people either don't want you to know about or don't want you to think about. And that's something we all need to be aware of.
There seems to be something much more urgent and compelling about the child drowning right in front of you. But why?
Because we've evolved as a species to be protective of children. It's part of our evolutionary background. We want to protect our tribe and our genetic future. There is a specific pecking order to how people view other people. If it was a 90-year-old guy out there splashing around, you wouldn't get nearly as many people running out there to help, especially at the risk of their own safety or life. I have nothing against Alex, nothing at all, but this was just a PSA for, hey, I'm being emotional. I don't care about your emotions. I care if your emotions are being tempered by your intellect, and clearly, in a lot of cases, not just Alex's, because he's not any different than a lot of people, but in a lot of cases, they are clearly not. Now, I probably won't do a lot of these videos because I don't know how popular they'd be, but if anybody wants to see me take on more non-religious philosophical problems, I'd be happy to oblige once in a while. The problem with a lot of these philosophical conundrums is that they are intended to have a very fast, very emotional reaction, yet if you sit down and think about it, they actually don't fare very well. They are constructed specifically to get the answer that the philosopher wants to receive. And that's kind of dishonest if you think about it. I'm just saddened that there are so many people so easily swayed by their emotions to the point that blatant dishonesty is a thing. People can get conned into things by pushing these emotional narratives. Maybe there's something we ought to do about that. Maybe it's about time we thought. Maybe it's about time we realized what was going on and said, hey, this emotional stuff, we're going to push it to the side and we're going to actually think about what's going on. Thinking is more important than feeling. I know that's going to piss a lot of people off, but it's true. And the farther we get on this planet, the more true it has to be. Think more. It's okay to feel where it's appropriate, but think more. It can only help.
Bum